She thought the worst had already happened the moment she was forced onto the auction block. But the real story began when a giant Apache stepped forward with only $2 and a reason no one expected. What she told him next would change both their lives forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory's sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty town square of Prescott in the summer of 1876. A crowd of rough miners, ranchers, and drifters had gathered around a wooden platform where the monthly auction was taking place. The auctioneer's voice rang out over the murmuring crowd, selling off livestock, mining equipment, and unclaimed goods. Sarah McKenna stood on that platform with her chin held high, her wild auburn hair tangled, and her green eyes blazing with defiance. Her dress was torn and dusty from weeks of surviving alone in the mountains after her father's trading post had been raided by outlaws. The sheriff had found her half-starved, brought her to town, and now declared her an orphan with debts to settle from her father's unpaid accounts. "What am I bid for this strong young woman?" the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the square. "She can cook, clean, and work hard, perfect for any household needing an extra hand." Sarah's fists clenched at her sides. This was not happening. She was not some piece of property to be sold off like a horse or a wagon. "I won't be sold!" she shouted, her voice cracking with fury and desperation. "You have no right!" The crowd laughed, and the auctioneer ignored her outburst. "Do I hear $1, $1 for this spirited girl?" A few scattered bids came from the crowd, but most men seemed hesitant. Sarah's reputation for being wild and unmanageable had already spread through town. She had tried to escape twice, once nearly making it to the hills before being caught. Then, at the back of the crowd, a figure moved forward. He was massive, standing well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and long black hair that fell past his shoulders. His face was bronze, his features distinctly Apache, though he wore a mix of traditional and frontier clothing. His name was Naka, which meant warrior in his native tongue, though the townspeople knew him simply as Nathan Stone. Nathan had been raised by Apache but had left the tribal lands years ago, living between two worlds. He worked as a tracker and scout, his skills unmatched in the territory. He had money saved from his work, and something about the defiant girl on the platform stirred something deep within him. He saw not a commodity, but a survivor, someone fighting against impossible odds. $2, his deep voice carried across the square. The crowd fell silent, turning to look at the Apache giant. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $2. Do I hear 3? Silence. No one dared bid against Nathan. His reputation was formidable, and while he had never caused trouble in town, there was an intensity about him that commanded respect and wariness in equal measure. $2 going once, going twice, sold to Nathan Stone. Sarah's eyes found the man who had just purchased her, and her blood boiled. He was walking toward the platform with long, purposeful strides. When he reached her, she stepped back, her eyes flashing dangerously. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I won't obey. I'm not some tame thing you can put in a cage." Nathan looked down at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "I did not buy a slave," he said quietly, his voice accented but clear. "I bought your freedom from this auction. What you do with it is your choice." Sarah blinked, caught off guard. She had expected commands, restrictions, ownership. Instead, this giant of a man spoke of freedom, but she had learned not to trust easily. Her father had trusted the wrong people, and it had cost him everything. "I don't believe you," she said, crossing her arms. "Everyone wants something." Nathan paid the auctioneer and signed the papers. Then he turned back to Sarah. "Come, we talk away from these people." He began walking toward the edge of town where his horse was tied. Sarah hesitated, looking around at the crowd dispersing, at the sheriff who had brought her here, at the town that had tried to sell her like cattle. She had no money, no family, nowhere to go. With a frustrated growl, she followed the tall Apache, keeping several paces behind him. They reached his horse, a magnificent paint stallion that whinnied softly at Nathan's approach. He stroked the animal's neck gently before turning to face Sarah. "My name is Naka, but whites call me Nathan Stone. I live in the mountains, 3 hours' ride from here. I track for the army, hunt, live free. I need no servant, no wife I did not choose freely, no slave. But I could not watch them sell you to men who would break your spirit. Sarah studied him warily, searching for deception in his face. She found none, only a quiet strength and something that might have been understanding. Why would you help me? You don't know me. I know what it is to be treated as less than human, Nathan replied. I know what it is to fight for dignity when others try to take it. You remind me of a wild Mustang, meant to run free in the mountains, not to be broken and penned. Despite herself, Sarah felt her defenses crack slightly. No one had spoken to her with such respect since her father died. But she was still wary, still ready to run if needed. So what now? You just let me go? Nathan considered this. Where will you go? You have no supplies, no horse, no food. The mountains are dangerous for someone alone and unprepared. Winter comes in 3 months. He was right, and Sarah hated that he was right. She had barely survived the last few weeks, and that was summer. She would never make it through an Arizona winter alone in the wilderness. I offer you a choice, Nathan continued. Come to my cabin. I have extra room, plenty of food. You can stay until you decide what you want to do, where you want to go. You work if you wish, learning to survive in the mountains, or you rest and heal. But you are not my property. You are free to leave whenever you choose. Sarah's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Freedom, choice. These were things she thought she had lost forever when her father died. She looked at this strange Apache man who had spent $2, a significant sum, just to give her these things back. Why should I trust you? She asked, but her voice had lost some of its edge. You should not, Nathan said honestly. Trust must be earned, but you can try and see if I prove worthy of it. Or you can walk away now. Take your chances alone. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the desert. Sarah thought of the cold nights ahead, of hunger, of danger. She thought of her father, who had always told her to be strong, but also to be wise. Sometimes wisdom meant accepting help when it was offered honestly. 1 week, she said finally. I'll come for 1 week, but I'm warning you now, I'm not easy to live with. I don't follow orders well. I speak my mind, and I won't be tamed. A hint of a smile touched Nathan's stern features. I would expect nothing less from a mountain girl. Come, we have far to ride before dark. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Sarah stiffened at the closeness, but Nathan kept his touch respectful, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. The horse began to move, carrying them away from Prescott, away from the auction and the crowds, toward the distant mountains that rose purple and mysterious against the evening sky. As they rode, Sarah found herself thinking about this unexpected turn of events. She had been so certain her life was over, that she would be sold to some cruel rancher or miner who would work her to death. Instead, she was riding toward the mountains with a man who spoke of freedom and choice. She did not trust him yet. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself a sliver of hope. And if he proved false, well, she would run. She had always been good at running, at surviving. The mountains were in her blood, and they would shelter her if needed. Nathan remained silent as they rode, his focus on the trail ahead, but he was acutely aware of the tense young woman sitting in front of him. He had spoken truthfully when he said he saw himself in her. He too had fought against those who would define him, limit him, break him to their will. He too had chosen freedom over acceptance, solitude over subjugation. He did not know what had prompted him to bid on her. Perhaps it was the fire in her eyes, the refusal to bow even when standing on an auction block. Perhaps it was the memory of his own mother, sold and traded among whites until she had finally escaped back to her people. Whatever the reason, he had acted on instinct, and now this wild, defiant girl was his responsibility, at least for a week. The sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and red when they finally reached the foothills. The temperature dropped as they climbed higher, and Sarah shivered slightly. Without a word, Nathan reached back and pulled a blanket from his saddlebag, draping it around her shoulders. Thank you, she murmured, surprised by the gesture. The mountains are cold at night, he replied simply. We are almost there. Nathan's cabin sat in a small valley surrounded by pine trees and towering rock formations. A clear stream ran nearby, its water sparkling in the fading light. The cabin itself was well built, larger than Sarah had expected, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. A small barn stood behind it, and she could see a garden plot and several animal pens. "This is your home?" Sarah asked as Nathan helped her down from the horse. "For 5 years now," he replied, leading his horse toward the barn. "I built it myself, piece by piece." Sarah followed him, looking around with grudging appreciation. This was no rough camp or temporary shelter. This was a real home, built with skill and care. Inside the barn, she saw 2 more horses, several goats and chickens roosting in the rafters. "You live alone here?" she asked. "Yes. Sometimes I am gone for weeks, tracking for the army or hunting, but I always return." He unsaddled his horse and began brushing the animal down with practiced movements. Sarah watched, noticing how gentle his large hands were, how the horse leaned into his touch with trust. Animals knew things about people, her father had always said. They could sense cruelty or kindness in ways humans often missed. When the horse was settled, Nathan led Sarah to the cabin. Inside, it was simple but comfortable. There was a main room with a fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, shelves lined with supplies and books, and 2 doors leading to what she assumed were sleeping quarters. Everything was neat and orderly, which surprised her somehow. "You can have the back room," Nathan said, opening one of the doors. "It has a bed, a chest for belongings, a window facing east for morning light." Sarah peered inside. The room was small but clean, with a real bed covered in warm blankets, a wooden chest, and a small table with a basin for washing. It was more than she had expected, more than she had hoped for. "The other room is yours?" she asked. "Yes. There is also a bathing room behind the cabin, fed by the stream. The water is cold but clean. Tomorrow I will show you everything, where things are kept, how things work here. But tonight you must be hungry." As if on cue, Sarah's stomach growled loudly. She had not eaten properly in days. Nathan's expression softened slightly, and he moved to the fireplace, building up the fire with efficient movements. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the table. "I will make food." Sarah wanted to argue, to prove she did not need his help, but exhaustion and hunger won out. She sat at the table watching as Nathan moved around the cabin, gathering ingredients. He worked with surprising skill, preparing a stew with dried meat, beans, wild onions, and herbs. The smell made Sarah's mouth water. "You cook well," she observed, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "A man who lives alone must learn many things," Nathan replied. "Cooking, sewing, building, healing. The mountains do not care if you are man or woman. They only care if you can survive." As the stew simmered, Nathan sliced bread he had made himself and set out 2 wooden bowls. When the food was ready, he served them both generous portions. Sarah ate ravenously, barely pausing for breath. The stew was delicious, seasoned with herbs she did not recognize but tasted of the wild places, of earth and sky and growing things. Nathan ate more slowly, watching her with those unreadable dark eyes. "When did you last eat a real meal?" Sarah paused, a spoonful halfway to her mouth. 5 days, maybe 6. After the outlaws raided the trading post, I ran into the hills. I found berries, caught a rabbit once, but mostly I just kept moving." "Your father, he died in the raid?" Sarah's hand tightened on her spoon. The grief was still raw, still painful. "Yes, he tried to fight them off. They shot him, took everything, burned what they could not carry. I hid in the cellar until they left. Then I ran." "I am sorry," Nathan said quietly. "It is hard to lose family." "Did you lose yours too?" Sarah asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too soon. But Nathan did not seem offended. "My mother died when I was young. She was Apache, captured by whites, sold many times. She escaped and returned to the tribe, but she was never the same. She died of sickness when I was 10 winters old. My father was a white trapper who never knew I existed. I was raised by my mother's brother, taught the ways of the Apache. But I never fully belonged with the tribe because of my mixed blood, and I never belonged with whites for the same reason. So I chose to belong to myself, to these mountains." Sarah felt an unexpected kinship with this quiet giant. They were both orphans, both caught between worlds, both fighting to define themselves on their own terms. Is that why you helped me? Because you understood? Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply could not walk away. They finished eating in comfortable silence. Sarah had not realized how much she missed this. The simple act of sharing a meal with another person, of not being alone with her grief and fear. When they were done, Nathan cleared the dishes and washed them in a basin of water heated over the fire. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will be a long day if you wish to learn about living here. Sarah stood, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Nathan, I want to ask you something, and I want the truth. He turned to face her, giving her his full attention. Ask. What do you really want from me? No one helps someone for nothing. What is it you expect? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. I expect nothing, but I hope that perhaps you will choose to stay beyond 1 week. The mountains are lonely, and I have lived alone for many years. It would be good to have someone to talk to share meals with, to work beside. But that is hope, not expectation. If you choose to leave after 1 week, I will give you supplies, a horse, and directions to any town you wish to reach. His honesty disarmed her. Sarah had expected demands, conditions, hidden agendas. Instead, he offered friendship, companionship, nothing more. She did not know how to respond to that kind of generosity. I will think about it, she said finally. That is all I ask. Sarah went to her room and closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her hands over the soft blankets. Outside, she could hear Nathan moving around the cabin, banking the fire, checking the doors. The sounds were domestic, comforting, safe. For the first time since her father's death, Sarah felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. She was not safe yet, not truly. She still did not fully trust Nathan, still kept her guard up. But she was safer than she had been in weeks, and that was something. She lay down on the bed, still fully dressed, and pulled the blankets up to her chin. Through the small window, she could see stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The mountains rose around her like protective walls, and the sound of the stream was a gentle lullaby. Sarah closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she slept deeply and without nightmares. The next morning, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee brewing. She sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She had slept in her clothes, and now she felt dirty and rumpled. In the main room, Nathan was already awake, tending to the fire and preparing breakfast. He looked up when she emerged and nodded a greeting. Good morning. There is water heated if you wish to wash. Clean clothes in the chest in your room. They were my mother's. They may be large, but better than torn dress. Sarah looked down at her ruined clothing and nodded. Thank you, I will wash after breakfast. They ate together, a simple meal of corn cakes and eggs from the chickens. Then Nathan showed her around the property, explaining how everything worked. The garden needed tending, the animals needed feeding. Water needed to be hauled from the stream. There was firewood to be split, repairs to be made, endless work to keep the homestead running. If you wish to help, you can choose what tasks you prefer, Nathan explained. If you wish to rest and heal, that is also good. But I think you are not the type to sit idle. He was right about that. Sarah had never been good at doing nothing. I will help. I know how to garden, how to care for animals. My father taught me. Good. Then we worked together. And so began Sarah's new life in the mountains. The days developed a rhythm, waking with the sun, tending the animals, working in the garden, preparing meals, maintaining the cabin. Nathan was a patient teacher, showing her which plants were edible, how to track animals, how to read the weather in the sky and the behavior of birds. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and sometimes Nathan would tell her stories of the Apache, of the mountains, of the things he had seen in his travels. Sarah found herself opening up as well, sharing memories of her father, of the trading post, of her dreams before everything had fallen apart. The week passed quickly, and when the 7th day arrived, Nathan said nothing about their agreement. Neither did Sarah. She simply continued with her tasks, and he continued with his, and the unspoken understanding between them grew stronger. 2 months had passed since Sarah had come to the mountain cabin, and autumn was beginning to paint the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. The garden had been harvested, the meat smoked and stored, and preparations for winter were well underway. Sarah had transformed from the half-starved, defiant girl on the auction block into a capable mountain woman, her cheeks now healthy with color, her body strong from constant work. But something else was changing too, something neither Sarah nor Nathan spoke of directly. The comfortable companionship they had developed was deepening into something more complex, more intense. Sarah found herself watching Nathan when he worked, admiring the strength in his movements, the quiet confidence he carried. And she had caught him watching her too, his dark eyes holding expressions she could not quite read, but that made her heart beat faster. One crisp October morning, Nathan announced he needed to go into town for supplies and to collect payment for tracking work he had done the previous month. "I will be gone 2 days, perhaps 3, he said as he prepared his horse. "Will you be safe here alone?" Sarah bristled slightly at the question. "I have been taking care of myself in these mountains for months now. I will be fine." Nathan smiled, that rare expression that softened his stern features. "I know you will, but I worry anyway." "It is allowed, yes?" The admission caught Sarah off guard, warming something deep inside her. "Yes," she said softly, "it is allowed." Before he left, Nathan showed her where he kept his rifle and ammunition. "Only if you need it," he said, "for protection or hunting. You have become a good shot." Sarah had indeed learned to shoot over the past weeks, though she still preferred the bow Nathan had taught her to use. There was something satisfying about the silent flight of an arrow, the skill required to place it true. After Nathan rode away, Sarah threw herself into work, trying to ignore the strange emptiness his absence created. She tended the animals, repaired a weak spot in the chicken coop, and spent the afternoon gathering the last of the wild herbs before the first frost came. As evening fell, she sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky blazed with color, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. Sarah realized with some surprise that she was happy here, truly happy for the first time since before her father died. This mountain sanctuary had become home, and Nathan had become more than just the man who had saved her from the auction block. She cared for him, she realized, cared deeply. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it felt right, like something that had been growing quietly all along, waiting for her to notice. The next day passed uneventfully. Sarah worked on preserving the last of the vegetables, then practiced with her bow, placing arrows in a target Nathan had set up near the barn. She was so focused on her shooting that she almost missed the sound of approaching horses, but something in the quality of the sound made her freeze. These were not the steady, measured hoofbeats of Nathan's return. These were multiple horses, moving fast and careless. Sarah's instincts, honed by months of survival, screamed danger. She ran to the cabin and grabbed the rifle, checking that it was loaded. Then she positioned herself near a window where she could see the approach but remain hidden. Her heart pounded as 3 rough-looking men rode into the clearing. They were the kind of men Sarah had learned to recognize and fear. Outlaws, drifters, men who took what they wanted without regard for others. One of them pointed at the cabin and said something to the others, and they all laughed. Sarah's blood ran cold. They thought she was alone and vulnerable. The leader, a scarred man with greasy hair, dismounted and walked toward the cabin. "Hello in there. We saw smoke from your chimney. We are just travelers needing a place to rest for the night. No need to be unfriendly." Sarah did not answer. Her father had taught her that men like this only understood strength. She raised the rifle and fired a shot into the dirt near the man's feet. He jumped back with a curse. "I am not alone, and you are not welcome here," Sarah shouted, putting all the authority she could muster into her voice. "Leave now, and there will be no trouble." The man laughed, though his eyes had gone hard and dangerous. "That is a woman's voice. Boys, we have got ourselves a little wildcat here all alone." He took another step forward. Sarah fired again, this time closer to his boot. "The next one goes through your leg. I mean what I say. Leave." The outlaws exchanged glances. They had not expected resistance, had thought this would be easy. But the girl clearly knew how to shoot, and none of them wanted to be first to take a bullet. "You cannot stay awake forever, girl," the leader called out. "We can wait. When you sleep, we will come in anyway. Might as well make it easy on yourself." Sarah's mind raced. He was right. She could not hold them off indefinitely, but she refused to show fear. "This cabin belongs to Nathan Stone. Perhaps you have heard of him. The Apache tracker. When he returns and finds you here, you will wish you had ridden on. That gave them pause. Nathan's reputation was indeed known throughout the territory. The outlaws talked among themselves in low voices. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. We will make camp over by those trees. We are not leaving until we get what we came for, girl. You think about that while we wait. They rode to the tree line and began setting up camp, clearly planning to wait her out. Sarah felt panic rising but pushed it down. She had to think, had to be smart. Nathan would not be back until tomorrow at the earliest, possibly not until the day after. She had to survive until then. As darkness fell, Sarah barricaded the doors and kept the rifle close. She did not dare light more than a single candle, wanting to keep most of the cabin dark so the men could not see her movements through the windows. She positioned herself where she could watch their camp, seeing their fire burning bright in the night. Hours passed. The outlaws took turns keeping watch, making it clear they were serious about waiting. Sarah fought against exhaustion, knowing that falling asleep could mean disaster. She kept herself awake by moving around the cabin, by splashing cold water on her face, by gripping the rifle until her hands ached. Just after midnight, she saw movement near the barn. One of the men was trying to sneak closer under cover of darkness. Sarah fired a warning shot in his direction, and he scrambled back to the camp. She heard them cursing, arguing among themselves. The night stretched on endlessly. Sarah had never felt so alone, so frightened. But beneath the fear was a core of steel that her father had forged, and that Nathan had helped strengthen. She would not break. She would not surrender. She would survive. Dawn came finally, gray and cold. Sarah had made it through the night, but she was exhausted, running on pure determination. The outlaws were still there, their camp a dark presence at the edge of the clearing. She knew she could not last another full day and night like this. Then, just as despair began to creep in, she heard it. The sound of a single horse approaching fast from the mountain trail. Hope surged through her. Nathan. She ran to the window facing the trail and saw him riding hard, his paint stallion eating up the ground with powerful strides. He must have seen the outlaws' horses, must have known something was wrong. The outlaws saw him too and scrambled to their feet, reaching for their weapons. But Nathan did not slow down. He rode straight into the camp, his presence so commanding, so fierce that the three men actually took steps backward. Nathan dismounted in one fluid motion, and Sarah saw that he carried not just his rifle but also a knife and a tomahawk. His face was set in hard lines, his eyes blazing with a fury she had never seen before. "You are on my land," Nathan said, his voice deadly quiet. "Threatening what is mine. You have one chance to leave alive. Take it." The leader tried to bluster. "We were just camping, no harm meant. The girl there, she started shooting at us for no reason." "Do not lie to me." Nathan cut him off. "I can read the truth in the earth, in the tracks your horses made circling the cabin, in the bullet holes where Sarah defended herself. You meant harm. Now you leave or you die here. Choose now." There was something in Nathan's tone, in his absolute certainty, that broke the outlaw's nerve. They had faced many men, but there was something different about this Apache warrior. Something primal and dangerous that warned them this was not a fight they could win. "We are leaving," the leader said quickly, motioning to his companions. "No trouble from us." They mounted their horses and rode out fast, not looking back. Nathan watched them until they disappeared from sight, then turned and ran to the cabin. Sarah threw open the door and stumbled out onto the porch, her legs weak with relief. Nathan caught her as she swayed, his strong arms wrapping around her protectively. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands checking her for injuries even as his eyes scanned her face. "No, I am fine. I did not sleep. I had to keep watch." The words tumbled out, and suddenly Sarah was shaking, all the fear and stress of the long night catching up with her. Nathan lifted her easily and carried her inside, setting her gently on a chair by the fire. He stirred up the flames, then pressed a cup of water into her hands. "Drink, then tell me everything." Sarah drank and told him about the outlaws, about holding them off through the night, about her fear that she would not last until he returned. Nathan listened, his jaw clenched, his hands flexing as though he wished the men had stayed so he could make them pay for frightening her. "You did well," he said when she finished. "You were brave and smart. Your father would be proud." The praise meant everything coming from him. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, tears of relief and exhaustion and something deeper. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Not just for myself, but that I would never see you again, never get to tell you." She stopped, suddenly realizing what she had been about to say. Nathan knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his much larger ones. "Tell me what, Sarah?" Sarah looked into his eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. Caring, longing, the fear of speaking truths that could not be unsaid. But she was done with hiding, done with running from what she felt. "That I love you," she said simply. "I love you, Nathan Stone. I do not know when it happened. Maybe the first day when you spoke to me of freedom. Maybe during all those evenings by the fire. Maybe this morning when you came riding back to protect me. But I love you, and I needed you to know." Nathan's expression transformed, hardness melting into tenderness. He raised her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "And I love you, wild mountain girl who would not be tamed. I have loved you since I saw you on that auction block, refusing to bow. You are everything I never knew I needed. Brave, fierce, true. You make these mountains feel less lonely. You make my life feel complete." Sarah felt joy burst through her chest like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She slid from the chair to kneel with him, and Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Yes," Sarah breathed. He kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms wrapping around his neck. It felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece of herself she had not known was lost. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling, happiness shining in their eyes. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now you rest. And when you wake, we talk about our future together, if you will have me." "I will have you," Sarah said firmly. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after." Nathan carried her to her bed, tucking the blankets around her. "Sleep, my brave one. I will keep watch. You are safe now." And Sarah, finally allowing herself to trust completely, closed her eyes and slept deeply, knowing she was protected, knowing she was loved, knowing she was home. Winter arrived in the mountains with a vengeance, blanketing the world in white and transforming the cabin into a warm haven against the cold. Sarah and Nathan had spent the months since their confession building their life together, their love growing stronger with each passing day. They had ridden to Prescott in late autumn, where Nathan had arranged for a proper marriage ceremony with the circuit judge. The townspeople had been shocked to see the wild girl from the auction returning as the respected tracker's bride. But Sarah held her head high, her hand firmly clasped in Nathan's, proud to be his wife. Now, as January winds howled outside, Sarah stood at the cabin window, watching snow swirl through the pines. She smiled, thinking how different her life was from what it had been just 8 months ago. The frightened, defiant girl on the auction block had become a confident woman, secure in her place in the world and in the love of an extraordinary man. "What makes you smile like that?" Nathan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Sarah leaned into his warmth. "I was thinking about how strange life is. If those outlaws had not raided my father's trading post, if the sheriff had not brought me to that auction, if you had not been there that day, none of this would have happened. I would never have found you, found this place, found myself." Nathan rested his chin on top of her head. "The Apache believe that all things happen as they must, that the spirits guide us to where we need to be. I did not believe that before, but meeting you made me believe again." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the snow. The cabin was snug and warm, the fire crackling cheerfully, the scent of baking bread filling the air. Outside, the world was harsh and cold, but inside they had created a sanctuary of love and peace. "Nathan," Sarah said, turning in his arms to face him, "I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him look at her carefully, his dark eyes searching her face. "What is it?" Sarah took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Nathan just stared at her, processing her words. Then his face broke into a smile of such pure joy that Sarah's heart swelled. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing before setting her down gently and kissing her tenderly. "A child," he murmured against her lips. Our child. Sarah, you have given me everything. A home, a family, a future. I never dreamed I could be this happy. We have given each other everything, Sarah corrected, her own eyes bright with tears of joy. I was lost when you found me, broken and alone. You showed me that I could be strong and soft at the same time, that I could be fierce and loving, that I could build something beautiful from the ruins of my old life. They spent the rest of the day planning for the baby, talking about names and where to put the cradle Nathan would build, about teaching their child to love the mountains as they did. As evening fell, they sat by the fire. Sarah nestled against Nathan's side, his hand resting protectively over where their child grew. Boy or girl, it does not matter, Nathan said thoughtfully. We will teach them to be strong, to be kind, to choose their own path in life. They will know both the Apache ways and the white ways, and they will decide for themselves who they wish to be. Like their father did, Sarah said softly. You are the bravest person I know, Nathan. Not because you can track and hunt and fight, but because you chose to be yourself when the world wanted you to be something else. You chose freedom over acceptance, truth over comfort. I want our child to have that same courage. Nathan pulled her closer. They will. With you as their mother, how could they not? You stood on an auction block and refused to be broken. You faced down outlaws alone to protect what was yours. You left everything familiar to build a new life in these mountains. You are the brave one, Sarah Stone. The winter passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Nathan built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, carving intricate designs of mountains and eagles and running horses into the wood. Sarah sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her heart full of dreams for their coming child. As spring arrived and the snow melted, revealing green grass and wildflowers, Sarah's belly grew round and full. She moved more slowly now, but she was healthy and strong, still helping with the garden and the animals, still shooting her bow and riding her horse, though Nathan worried and fussed over her constantly. I am not made of glass, she would tease him. Mountain women are tough. Our baby will be tough too. I know, Nathan would reply. But you are precious to me. I cannot help but worry. In early May, as the world burst into full bloom, Sarah's labor began. Nathan had brought a midwife from a nearby settlement, a kind Apache woman named Desba who had known Nathan's mother years ago. Desba stayed at the cabin as Sarah's time approached, teaching Nathan what to expect and how to help. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next day. Nathan stayed by Sarah's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement in both English and Apache. Sarah drew strength from his presence, from the love in his eyes, from the knowledge that she was not alone. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their baby was born. A daughter, tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and her father's bronze skin. She came into the world wailing lustily, and the sound was the most beautiful thing either parent had ever heard. Desba cleaned the baby and placed her in Sarah's arms. Sarah looked down at her daughter, overwhelmed with love so fierce it took her breath away. Nathan leaned over them both, his eyes wet with tears he did not try to hide. She is perfect, Sarah whispered. Look at her, Nathan. We made this beautiful little person. What shall we name her? Nathan asked, stroking his daughter's tiny hand with one gentle finger. They had discussed many names over the winter, but now, looking at their child, Sarah knew exactly what she should be called. Hope. Her name is Hope because she represents everything good that came from something bad. She is our hope for the future, our proof that love can grow in the most unexpected places. Hope, Nathan repeated, testing the name. It is perfect. Hope Stone. May she grow up strong and free like her mother. The days that followed were full of new challenges and new joys. Hope was a demanding baby, wanting to be fed and held constantly, but Sarah and Nathan did not mind. They took turns walking her when she fussed, singing to her in both English and Apache, showing her the mountains through the cabin windows. As summer arrived, Sarah regained her strength and began teaching Hope about the world around them. Though the baby was too young to understand, Sarah would carry her into the garden and tell her the names of plants, would sit with her by the stream and let her hear the water's song, would hold her up to see the eagles soaring overhead. Nathan was a devoted father, patient and gentle despite his size and strength. He would spend hours just holding Hope, telling her stories of her ancestors, of the mountains, of the great wide world she would one day explore. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with Hope sleeping between them, Nathan turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this life? You could have gone to a city, found an easier path, lived among more people." Sarah looked at him with surprise. "Regret this? Nathan, I have never been happier in my life. I have you, I have Hope, I have these mountains and this home we have built together. What more could I possibly want? Sometimes I worry that I am selfish, keeping you here in isolation when you could have so much more." Sarah set down the sleeping baby carefully, then took Nathan's face in her hands, making him look at her. "Listen to me carefully. That day on the auction block when everyone was trying to break me, you were the one who saw me as I truly was. You gave me freedom when everyone else tried to take it away. You loved me for being wild and fierce, not despite it. You gave me a home, a family, a life full of purpose and joy. There is nothing selfish about that. This is exactly where I want to be, exactly who I want to be with." Nathan pulled her close, holding her tight. "I love you, Sarah Stone. More than mountains, more than sky, more than freedom itself. And I love you, Nathan Stone. You were worth $2 at auction, but you are priceless to me." They both laughed at that, remembering that day that had changed both their lives. $2 had seemed like nothing at the time, just a small amount of money exchanged for a girl no one else wanted. But it had bought Sarah her freedom, and it had given Nathan the family he had always longed for. It had been the best investment either of them had ever made. As the years passed, their family grew. Hope was joined by a brother they named Sky, and then another daughter they called Dawn. The cabin was expanded, new rooms added to accommodate their growing family. The children grew up wild and free, learning to hunt and track from their father, learning to garden and heal from their mother, learning to be strong and kind and true from both. The townspeople eventually accepted the unusual family, Nathan's reputation and Sarah's fierce protectiveness earning them respect. They would visit Prescott occasionally for supplies and to see the circuit judge who had married them, but they always returned to their mountains with relief, preferring the quiet beauty of their valley to the noise and crowds of town. Sarah sometimes thought about her father, about what he would think of the life she had built. She liked to believe he would be proud of her, proud that she had survived and thrived, that she had found love and built a family. She told her children stories about their grandfather, keeping his memory alive through her words. Nathan taught the children the Apache ways, the language and traditions of his mother's people, but he also taught them that they were free to choose their own path, to define themselves however they wished. They were neither fully Apache nor fully white, but uniquely themselves, children of two worlds who belonged to both and to neither, who made their own place in the mountains. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the cabin was peaceful, Sarah and Nathan would sit on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the stars come out over the mountains. They would talk about the day, about the children, about their plans and dreams, and sometimes they would simply sit in comfortable silence, hands clasped, content in the knowledge that they had found exactly what they needed in each other. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Nathan asked one night. "On the auction block?" Sarah smiled. "I said you would regret buying me, that I would not obey. And were you right? About not obeying?" "Absolutely. I am still stubborn and wild and impossible to tame." Nathan laughed, pulling her closer. "And I would not have you any other way. But you were wrong about one thing." "What is that?" "I have never regretted it. Not for one single moment. That $2 was the best money I ever spent." Sarah nestled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the strength of his arms around her, looking out at the mountains that had become her home. "And I never regretted saying yes to this life, to you, to all of it. I was so angry that day, so frightened and alone. I thought my life was over, but it was just beginning." They sat together as the stars wheeled overhead, as the mountains stood eternal watch around them, as their children slept peacefully inside. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of loss, had created love from unlikely circumstances, had made a family and a home in the wild places where they both belonged. Sarah McKenna, the wild mountain girl who had refused to be broken, had found her place in the world, and Nathan Stone, the Apache warrior who had walked between two worlds, had found his home. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone, a legacy of love, strength, and freedom that would live on in their children and their children's children. The mountains would remember their story, the story of two lost souls who found each other against all odds, who chose love over loneliness, who proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. And on quiet nights when the wind whispered through the pines, it seemed to carry their laughter, their love, their enduring joy, a testament to the power of choosing your own path and following your heart home.